Hello and welcome back to the lecture on applied econometrics, and we are talking about the difference in the concept of correlation and causality, and this is the third part of the lecture. Now, we have seen when we talk about causality, it is pretty intricately related to the question why, and we have also seen the why is coming from a hierarchy of whats. Okay. So, let us say what 1, what 2 and so forth. So, all these what questions are sort of giving us an answer to the why. Now, for example, we have seen the initially we have seen the example of scurvy. In the previous lecture, we talked about the the owner's decision whether to kill a chicken or not, and we also talked about the cigarette example. So, let us say in the cigarette example, let us say we actually end up proving that cigarette is causing cancer. Everywhere we see cigarette is causing cancer. So, it is still a very strong conviction, it is a strong correlation, but we really do not know for a fact why cigarette is causing cancer. Now, let us say we discovered that there is something called nicotine in cigarette that is causing cancer. Now, what is nicotine and why it is causing cancer? So, that also we do not know. Okay. So, perhaps we know that there is something called, let us say, polycyclic hydrocarbon that is causing cancer. Okay. So, again what in nicotine is causing cancer is polycyclic hydrocarbon. Now, then we can further ask, what is there in the polycyclic hydrocarbon that is causing cancer? So, you can further actually get into it and actually discover the molecular structure of polycyclic hydrocarbon, and that actually you can see what sort of chemical reaction that that causes when it enters inside your lungs, right. And then you see that some XYZ factor is actually happening because of the polycyclic hydrocarbon, and that is actually causing cancer. So, that is the thing, like as you sort of go deep into this layers of what and what and what, you actually end up reaching to the why, and your why is becoming more and more strong, right. So, that is basically the structure of causality. That is basically how you see how causality is different from correlation. Okay. Now, why it is so important? Now, the next question I would ask, why is it so important? Why is it so important to understand causality? I understand. Okay. So, there is a series of what questions that is leading to the why question, but my point is, why do you even bother? Why do we care? Okay. And to answer this question, I will actually tell you another, basically it's a beautiful book called Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and I will sort of bring some lessons from that book. And in that book, author is actually asking, so it's like the animal kingdom. Let's go back to the animal kingdom, maybe some million years back, and if we see that humans like us, we are if we consider our physical structure, we are rather frail if you compare us with the lions and tigers, and that time if we had mammoths and like this dinosaurs. So, we are rather frail animal, right, who could have like lived on the trees and branches, and we are sort of scared of the animals because we are really frail. Now, fast forward million years, we see that we are basically the masters of the animal kingdom, the humans, and that frail animal million years back has become the master of the animal kingdom. Now, why that has happened? What we had, what this human being had that made us the master of the animal kingdom, and that is rather an interesting question, right. And this superiority, when you try to uncover the superiority, you will say that so the superiority is because of we have learned to sort of how to use fire or how to create fire, or let us say how to do agriculture, right. Instead of gathering and hunting, we actually learn how to do agriculture. So, you can give me many facts on, let us say, humans actually build dams. Okay. So many other factors you can actually uncover. We build the house, right. So, all these things we did over a period of time, we learned how to do that. Now, you can say that why humans are superior? Why humans? If I ask you why humans are superior to other animals, how we have become superior to other animals, and you can give me So, to why answer this fire, agriculture, dams and house and so forth. So, you say we have done that. Now, I will ask why or how humans have learned this, whereas other animals could not learn this, right. So, other animals could have learned the same way, like the fire and agriculture and dams and house, so many things. But why other animals could not learn it, whereas humans can learn it? Now, to answer that, Yuval is actually giving an answer that it's imagination. So, that it is humans, we could imagine certain things. Okay. So, when we see that the branches of tree are sort of rubbing against each other and the fire is being created, the same way human think that okay, so if we probably rub the stones with each other, we can actually create fire. Or if it sees that the seeds are falling from the tree and it is actually creating new trees, so perhaps if we plant the seed somewhere else, we can get a lot of fruits or a lot of vegetables from the other part. So, that way human could actually imagine things, right. Human could actually imagine things, and which is actually not the case with monkeys or chimpanzees or like for the other animals for that matter. So, when human we created dams, for example. So, dams or pyramids, let us say. So, we are told stories like a lot of laborers they toiled very hard, and because they are told that if you do this kind of work you can go to the heaven and so forth, and those stories they believed because they could imagine, they could believe that okay, this is a possibility. Now, this imagination is not there for monkeys or chimpanzees or other animals. You can tell a monkey to actually you can tell the story of heaven to a monkey, and you can try to see if they are actually bonding together to actually coming together to actually build your dam. That perhaps will not happen. So, it happened for humans because we could imagine. So, this power of imagination that actually lead us to where we are, the master of the animal kingdom, right. Now, why we talk about imaginations when we talk about causality? So, that is quite intricately related, because the moment we can imagine, so imaginations actually giving a plausible causal structure. So, it is not the causal structure, but a plausible causal structure, right. So, it is basically telling that why one factor is leading to the other. So, be it a story, be it our understanding of fire, be it the understanding of our how the agriculture can happen. So, all of these are actually giving human mind many possibilities that okay, this is a possibility, it can happen, right. And the imagination is basically nothing but dealing with all these plausible structures, plausible causal structures, right. So, that is the beginning of it. So, the moment we have these plausible causal structures, we then try to understand what for a fact will lead x from y, x to y. So, I know if I plant the seed somewhere else, for a fact that will I can see the plant somewhere else, right. It is not that the seed has to be planted under the tree, it can go somewhere else and still I can get the same tree. Or for a fact I know that I do not have to rub the branches against each other, but I can actually rub the stones and I can see the fire, right. But like, and also for the same thing, like when it does not matter like whether that causal link is correct or not, but the moment human has this plausible structure in their mind, we do not know whether we will go to heaven or not, but still we work, we toil hard to build the dam or to build the pyramid, right. So, that is the thing. So, the plausible structures are really important, and from this plausible causal structures we end up getting the causality. So, out of many explanations we actually end up getting the causality. So, in the same vein, the way humans started imagining, in the same vein, when we fast forward and see how let us say the scientists discovered gravity, right. The scientists discovered gravity, the apple has fallen on the ground, and they have understood why the apple has not it did not fly to the sky, right. So, there are many plausible structure, and they had come to the fact that this is a fact that it is gravity which is actually explaining why the apple has fallen down. Or for example, if you read the story of discovery of penicillin, this Alexander Fleming's the fascinating story, he just found out that some bacteria, some sort of mushrooms that grew on his bread is actually good, and because there was no harmful other bacteria or germs there on his bread after his wife kept the bread few days for his lunch, and he forgot to eat that. So, essentially the point is that we see that certain things are causing certain things, or certain things and certain things are related, which is correlation, and then we try to find out why. And the moment we actually uncover the why, we become very powerful, because you see, because we knew the concept called gravity, we are doing so many things, including the exploration of space, or since we knew the thing about penicillin, or the discovery of Alexander Fleming, we could actually advance so much into medical science. So, the causality, the moment we know A for a fact is causing B, for a fact, there is no doubt about it, A for a fact is causing B, then we become really powerful. That is the power. The causality gives you power. You can actually do a lot into that. You sort of advance the science and technologies and medicines and everywhere. So, this is the power. This is the power of causality, which has advanced human being where we are today. So, it is the power of imagination which are giving us plausible causal structure, and from there our capacity to discover what for a fact is causing A to B, and that's why causality is so important. Now, the last part of the lecture is the role of causality in econometrics. Causality in, let us say, statistics and econometrics. Now, causality, so in the early days, the statisticians were not very clear how causality and correlation are different. Initially, people used to think that perhaps correlation and causality are same, and in fact, correlations are easy to understand. You can just see two things are covariing, x and y are covariing, and you say that they are correlated. And that was kind of a celebrated concept at that time, and that is why we had Pearson's correlation coefficient, but we will never hear something like Pearson's causal coefficient. People used to talk about correlation, and correlation used to be celebrated. As I said, it is Pearson, then his student, his name was Galton, who is I think cousin brother of Charles Darwin. So, they all have they used to talk in the language of correlation. Now, it was realized that of course, correlation is an indication of causality, right, but correlation never proves causality, right. So, people in this discipline or even in the other disciplines started becoming a little sort of aware of, or they are rather cautious when they use the term causality. They would rather use the term correlation, because there is no dispute, but when you use the term causality, it is rather a challenging thing for you to prove that it is causally related, and that is why the term causality becomes somewhat sacrosanct. Okay. So, only later on we started talking about causality in statistics and in econometrics, and particularly in the context of econometrics, we will see something called structural equation modeling, where we sort of try to see a sequence of events, something like that, when A causes B, B causes C, and C causes D. So, like it is basically understanding the multiple you will see the correlations, but how if the all the correlations are holding true all the time. So, that is much more robust approach than just to see if A and B only are correlated. So, if I see there are three correlations which are happening time and again, so I have more conviction about if one thing is leading to the other thing. Also, in the same vein, in computer science, like people started talking about the graph network theory. So, essentially the fundamentals remain same to understand how this one factor is leading to other, and then when we see that there are multiple factors leading related to each other, then we have more conviction about saying this causal path, this path. Okay. I will end this lecture with one more concept that is pretty modern, and like it is a concept that has been in use for many years, but in economics, in the domain of economics or in econometrics, that's that's rather new, and that is randomized control trial. We will talk about these in the third module, the randomized control trial, and essentially what it does is it tries to control like also like it has a treatment group and it has a control group, and it tries to sort of mimic sort of an experimental setting. I am talking about in the domain of economics. So, randomized control trial, as I said, it is not an old concept in medicine. It has been in use for quite some time. It is like at least 100 years old concept. People like Fisher spoke about this. Now, what happens is be it in the experimental setup in the domain of medicine or be it in the domain of economics, where again we try to create a experimental setup in the natural environment. And what we do is we create a treatment group, a control group, and what do you mean by a treatment group is we create some sort of intervention designed for the treatment group, and we try to sort of create an environment where you can sort of say that all the other variables are controlled, like they are not changing. So, only the treatment variable is the only thing that is actually influencing the treatment group. Now, then we say if certain results are happening, that is because of the intervention, because everything else is controlled. Okay. So, we will talk in more detail about randomized control trial and how it explains causality. So, to end this lecture, so what you understood is that the correlation and causality both are important concept. Correlations are important because correlations are actually indicative of causality. It gives a plausible structure, plausible causal path, but then you have to find out for a fact what is actually making happen, what is actually making this A and B linkages to be together, the causal path basically. And causality, as we see that it is really a very powerful concept, and this is the concept that has advanced different streams of science and medicines and every aspect where human has made progress. So, human progress is very intricately related with our discovery of causality of different domains. So, we will talk a lot about causality in the third module. So, with this we sort of end this lecture. So, this is sort of an idea to give you what we are going to deal with in the next lectures. So, we will talk about correlation first.